And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vâlsan, broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. As always, alongside with me is here Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer, James Huff, making sure everything works just fine. Greetings, Jon, and I guess welcome for the last time in the current year.
Good evening. It still is the current year.
It still is
the current year next year as well.
No, next year is going to be current year +1, or I guess current year +3, since our Lord and Savior priest Justin Trudeau commenced the tradition 2 years ago. This is current year +2. For the 168th time of this episode, I'm always astounded by how far we've gone with this show. And I have to remark once again, there's still people listening to this. I mean, it is remarkable. It really is.
Yeah, I wonder how many people there actually listen to every episode.
I've met two of them. I've met two of them in the in 2016 at the ICMI. And I didn't test both of them. I tested one of them. I asked him what did I say in the third or fourth episode, and he was able to pretty much describe almost impeccably what did I say in one of the in the third or fourth episode. I don't remember exactly which of them I asked. So I don't know if he necessarily watched every single one, but definitely they did listen to most of them.
Well, I've listened to all the episodes that I'm not on. But I have no idea what you said in the third episode. Sorry.
Yeah, I now I don't remember what I said either. So I cheated. Then I went to a laptop and looked what the topic was at the third or fourth episode, and I was like, yeah, I probably said this, and this. Okay, let's try. Right. For the last episode of the current year +2, we have quite a lengthy news section. But I guess until then, we should complain a little bit about the weather. Isn't it cold as hell?
Yeah, it's quite cold. This started snowing sort of punctually on the 1st of December here in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
It has stopped since then. It sort of started intermittently again. I think it snowed early today, but now it stopped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it snowed almost every day since November the 28th. But for the last 2 days, it has only been just cold. -7, -8, -10, -12 during the night. Quite cold. But during the day, for instance, yesterday, it was almost like it was spring again. And it was like 10 or 11 degrees Celsius positive. That was a bit weird, but otherwise it's getting closer and closer. As we say here, it's Christmas coming, not the Easter. So... Right. So I guess let's dive in. Quite a long news section.
Okay, beginning with the Telegraph from the UK. Sexist criminals could get longer sentences on a proposal to make misogyny a type of hate crime. Sexist criminals could get longer sentences on a plan to make misogyny a type of hate crime. Senior officers are considering whether to count misogynistic offenses among hate crimes, which would mean longer sentences for perpetrators found to have acted out of hatred for women. Currently, crimes where a victim has been targeted on the grounds of characteristics including their race, sexuality, or disability can be made aggravated offenses and the perpetrators given longer sentences, but gender is not one of those categories. A pilot taking place in Nottingham since last year is due to report back to police chiefs who will consider whether to make wider changes affecting the rest of the country. Speaking to the Women and Equalities Committee, Assistant Chief Constable Mark Hamilton, who leads on hate crime for the National Police Chiefs Council, said he believed the police were, quote, going to take this forward, although it would also require action from the courts and CPS. In 2014, the Law Commission published a report recommending that the scope of hate crime be examined to see whether further categories should be introduced. It recommended that a full-scale review is conducted of the operation of the aggravated offenses and of the enhanced sentencing system. Last year, Nottingham Police announced a pilot of the new system, which allows women to report crimes as misogyny-fueled, and former Chief Constable Sue Fish is currently presenting evidence to the NPCC. If the changes were introduced, then sexist language or behavior will be treated as an aggravating factor to other crimes such as assault and harassment. Police have to consider whether the shift would require a statutory change or whether it could be done through a guidance to individual forces. Quote, you would take any offense that the person reported, and if it reached the evidential standard and has been reported as a hate crime, then would attract an enhanced sentence, added Mr. Hamilton. So it's not about a new crime of hate, it's about adding another category to the enhanced process that layers on top of an offense when it occurs. Prison sentences and fines can be uplifted under current CPS guidelines where an offender is found to have acted out of prejudice towards a victim. Responding to a question from Labour MP Jess Phillips, Mr. Hamilton indicated his own support for a review of the categories, but said other agencies such as CPS, courts and government would also have to implement the change. My slight concern would be that the police move on their own, he said. It's whether the criminal justice system from its end to end would respond to it. So it's a bigger debate than me. I think the time is right to consider it, he added, saying he hoped it would encourage women to report crimes. Hopefully there is an indication to victims that there's more reason to come forward and more reason to believe that the criminal justice system will take them seriously, he said. Last year, Nottingham police revealed that they investigated a case of misogyny every 3 days during July and August and said women were calling its helpline to explicitly ask that crime be recorded as a sexist hate crime. Several other forces are believed to be monitoring the pilot with a view to introducing similar schemes if it is successful. In 2015, the rules were expanded to give anti-Muslim hate crimes their own category, bringing them in line with anti-Semitic attacks. The most recent figures show that in total, 80,393 hate crimes were recorded in 2016 to 17, compared to 62,518 in 2015-16. The most significant increase since the Home Office began recording figures in 2011-12. Sexual offences have also increased, with recent figures showing that the UK has the highest recorded level of violent sex crimes in the EU. Statistics published by the European Commission show that of the 250,000 violent sexual crimes recorded by the police across the European Union in 2015, 64,500 were in England and Wales. Mr. Hamilton said it would be considered whether either gender-based or single-gender female should become a category of hate crime, suggesting that crimes against men could also be included.
It is never a good time to have this kind of legislation, period. It is never the right time to consider it. It is always the wrong time. It is always brutal insanity to have such thing in the books. But you know, go ahead.
And it doesn't matter whether it's an offense that is only targeted towards females or whether the law also considers hate crime against men. First of all, it's wrong either way. And secondly, even if it is gender neutral in the books, it will still be applied almost exclusively to so-called hate crime against women.
Even if it were to be applied equally, I still think it's wrong. I mean, if the police or the Crown Prosecution Service or the British Parliament or whatever, if they want an increase in general in fines and prison sentences and whatnot, then they should do that by the proper means of debating legislation in the Parliament, put it to the public and all of that, if that's what they really want. This is putting it through the back door using this kind of soft, bigoted language of, oh, we just want to protect the victims of hate, you know? Really?
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, why is a crime more severe because it's fueled by hate against a particular group? Or why is it worse to get, I don't know, beaten up because you're a Muslim compared to being beaten up because I don't know, someone doesn't like lawyers, or someone doesn't like I don't know, construction workers, or someone doesn't like your face, or someone doesn't like the fact that you're dating their sister, or whatever reason people have of beating other people up. Why is this one particular reason that you belong to some identifiable protected group? Why is that somehow more severe? I mean, does it cause you more pain if you're beaten up because you're a woman, or if you're beaten up because I don't know, you're a Pakistani or whatever? Why does that matter?
Yeah, it's not like someone is further beaten down or further dead or further raped or further whatever, just because the perpetrator shouted "you fucking cunt" while beating them, for
Yeah.
instance, or whatever. I mean, it just doesn't change anything. And again, if they really want to increase the fines or whatever the total sentence that certain offenders receive, then they should be doing that by modifying the law and offering, just a standard reason. We believe that beating people up in the streets is not punished harsh enough. That's a perfectly legitimate reason to put it to the parliament and have the parliament vote for an increase in punishments to that. It's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it just sort of has this sort of element of thought crime that you have
Mhm.
not only to commit an offense, which is perfectly reasonable to convict someone for beating someone up or murder or rape or whatever, but also you have wrong opinions, and we must punish you for having wrong opinions. I
Not
mean,
to mention, not to mention that it would also substantively disadvantage certain potential defendants. I mean, let's say, for instance, Tommy Robinson gets into a bar fight. And for those who don't know, Tommy Robinson is one of the guys who founded the English Defense League and eventually got pissed off with them and separated from them. Whatever. He's a guy who doesn't really particularly like Islam, which is great. Nobody should like Islam. Anyway, so if he gets into a bar fight, which he has in the past and probably will again in the future because he has a background of that kind of personality, and let's say he beats up, I don't know, three white dudes and a Pakistani Muslim dude. Suddenly, he'll be presumed to have beaten the Pakistani dude out of hatred for him being Muslim, even though that might not be the case because, he also beat three other dudes and it's just a regular bar fight of which many individuals across the United Kingdom and across Europe in general get into somewhat regularly. Now, of course, maybe they shouldn't get into those bar fights, but they do. And oftentimes the reason is not racial hatred or religious motivated hatred or whatever. And this kind of practices in the police and in the Crown Prosecution Service creates certain biases against certain potential defendants for no reason whatsoever. And in the end, I would argue it creates an inherent a racist and sexist bias against certain defendants for no reason whatsoever.
yeah. Also, this whole view that women are somehow an especially vulnerable group or a group that is uniquely under threat is just not true because most violent crime is committed against men.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this idea that the reason crime is committed against women is because people hate women is nonsense. If anything, you should be concerned that people like women too much and that they don't beat them up uh, enough to reach parity with men. I mean, obviously beating people up is bad, but if you have this sort of egalitarian view that everything should be equal, then shouldn't you be more concerned with people beating up men? Shouldn't be that the concern that you reduce that? So maybe if you have this sort of egalitarian view and you hold it honestly, you would have to be in favor of hate crime legislation that specifically targets violence against men.
Yeah, yeah. If it were to be consistent, but then again, this comes from a bunch of people, most of them schooled by an organization called Common Purpose, which is a militant, far leftist, progressive agitprop think tank. And these people are legitimately anti-white, anti-male, anti-Christian. This is how they were brought up to be, and they were brought up to get infiltrated into bureaucracies in order to lead beyond the rules. That's exactly what they call it in their own lingo. So, I mean, this is not coming from people who argue in good faith. This comes from very, very hateful people. Not to mention that their support inside the forget about the fact that some such disdainful nonsense as the Women and Equalities Committee even exists, but their support inside these such institutions comes from another very, very hateful and old friend of this show's, MP Jess Phillips, who is an individual who's a very, very known militant misandrist, a person who has made her hatred and disdain for men, particularly white men, very, very well known and consistent throughout the years.
Yep.
Right. Let's go to the next one. Oh boy.
also coming from the Telegraph. Ridicule as police say kissing under the mistletoe without consent is rape. Police have warned Christmas partygoers to obtain consent before kissing under the mistletoe, otherwise they will be guilty of rape. The advice came in a tweet since deleted by the police service of Northern Ireland, which has been criticized for trivializing sexual violence. The force, which has 159,000 followers, tweeted on Saturday, "If you bump into that special someone under the mistletoe tonight, remember that without consent, it is rape. Hashtag season's greetings." The message was then shared hundreds of times, attracting a backlash that was both angry and bemused. Some respondents suggested the PSNI had failed to understand the law regarding rape, while others said it showed that the organization had a warped view of the world. The tweet was subsequently deleted, with the force letter saying it had been taken out of context. The message was intended to form part of PSNI's Without Consent campaign, launched in 2013, which was previously run into criticism for allegedly victim blaming over a tweet in March warning women about the dangers of overindulging. One Twitter user, @69MIB, wrote, "Bumping into someone under the mistletoe is now considered rape? Why do you trivialize such serious issues with such a nonsense tweet?" Another, Mike Love, responded, "This tweet tells people that a kiss is rape. Do you realize what you've said? While the offense of sexual assault involves intentionally sexually touching another without consent and without reasonably believing the other consents, rape must involve penetration with the penis." PSNI later appeared to defend the thrust of its earlier message, tweeting on Sunday, "We posted a message on Twitter yesterday and that some may have taken out of context, but the message remains the same. When you are out socializing over the Christmas period, please remember, without consent, it is rape." Some Twitter users appeared more offended about what the message said about the police force attitude to Christmas than crime. One responded, "Don't put a downer on things, sure. Very cheerful, Mr. PSNI." Other people said they were astounded that the police service NI was not a spoof account. In August, a probe was launched following allegations that 6 PSNI officers and staff had tweeted sexist and racist messages, as well as those that could aggravate sectarian messages, which may potentially prejudice criminal investigations. Some of the tweets were said to have included allegations against a Northern Irish journalist and also the abuse of another journalist from a Belfast radio station. Kissing under the mistletoe is a centuries-old tradition, inspired by a belief that the plant increases life and fertility. Historical accounts suggest that the ancient Norse tradition was to kiss the hand of a host under the mistletoe rather than the cheek or lips.
No wonder that they're all green over there in Ireland. That's where the Grinch lives. Jesus Christ. I mean, no. Quite frankly, even after reading the story, I'm also surprised, just like the other Twitter users, that @policeservice_NI is not a spoof account. But then again, I remember that there have been several police services across the United Kingdom. It was also the Scottish police that told us to be careful what we tweet because they're watching, and if we're hateful, they're going to come and pick us up. And needless to say, the response to that tweet was a torrent of abuse coming from all over the place, because that is exactly what these people deserve. I mean, no, Jesus Christ. Why? I mean, doesn't the police have another business to do? Like, I don't know, making sure crime doesn't happen as opposed to tweeting stupid messages on Twitter? Now, I don't know exactly what is the legal statute of the police in Northern Ireland, but I dare to assume it's not really that different from the rest of Europe, which is their mission might be slightly different than pissing people off on Twitter.
Yeah, maybe we need a CCTV camera on every mistletoe.
Don't give them ideas. Oh boy. I mean, no. Just no. Sorry, yeah, I can't take this topic seriously. Let's go to the next one. Maybe I can take this one more seriously. Oh no, I can't. Coming from the Telegraph. Don't call us snowflakes. It damages our mental health, say young people. Being called a snowflake is damaging to mental health, young people say. Figures show that the majority of young people think of the term is unfair, and even more think it could have a negative effect on its own. The snowflake generation is a disparaging term now commonly used to refer to young people who are perceived to be oversensitive and intolerant of disagreement. But research by insurance firm Aviva found that 72% of 16 to 24-year-olds think the term is unfairly applied, while 74% think it could have a negative effect on young people's mental health. The figures also show that young people are more likely to have experienced stress, anxiety, and depression in the last year. Even if that were true, I don't care. Almost half of adults between 16 and 24 say they had experienced stress or anxiety, compared to just over a third of all UK adults. Young adults who are also more likely, were also more likely to be uncomfortable talking about a mental health problem, with 1 in 3 saying this compared to 27% of all adults. 13% also said they were experiencing a problem but had not sought help, compared to 7% of all adults. The firm's medical expert, Dr. Doug Wright, said the term could cause problems. Our findings suggest that younger adults are more likely to be experiencing mental health problems, so using a phrase which criticizes this age group could add to this issue. Any term used disparagingly to a segment of the population is inherently negative. While young adults in particular appear to take offense to the snowflake label, the majority of adults agree that the term is unfair and unhelpful, so it's important that people consider how such labels are used and the cumulative effect they could have on their recipients, he said. The phrase, which originated in America, has particularly come to refer to university students who use trigger warnings to alert readers or listeners to potentially distressing material, and safe spaces, which are meant to be free of certain opinions or ideas. It is also used to imply that young people are less resilient than older generations and quicker to take offense. It is thought to originate with U.S. author Chuck Palahniuk's 1996 book Fight Club, which contains the line, "You're not spatial, you're not beautiful and unique, snowflake." In an interview earlier this year, he took credit for the term, adding, "My friends who teach in high school tell me that their students are very easily offended."
So, in this article, snowflakes complain about being called snowflakes.
Yeah, basically.
Because they're really offended by the implication that they're easily offended.
Yeah, essentially. This goes to, it's sort of a follow-up to the story that we covered either 1 episode ago or 2 episodes ago, where every single minuscule mild inconvenience, I wouldn't even go as far as to call it an infraction, is framed in mental health terms. We had that egregiously stupid lady who told us that calling girls is apparently affecting their mental health. So now we have special snowflakes complaining that calling special snowflakes is affecting their mental health. I mean, are we done completely? I mean, at the very least, if this is the case, please tell us all so we can know where the baseline is. But are we done completely with the expectation that young people have any grit? I mean, we're just now going to take it for granted that we're raising a generation that doesn't have even the slightest shred of, I guess, mental strength in a way. I mean, we're just going to take it for granted now. Yeah, okay, the 16 to 24-year-olds are just snowflakes. That's it. It's just a given. Are we supposed to just take that as a baseline from now on?
Yeah, I mean, this whole article doesn't really make any sense. They said, don't call them snowflakes, and then they added all sorts of reasons for why it is reasonable to call them snowflakes. They have all these, they're so fragile, all these mental health issues and so on. So we're saying it's true. They are snowflakes. They are really easily offended by being called snowflakes and so on. And I mean, yeah, labeling the entire generation as snowflakes, I think this is a bit unfair, because obviously there's many different kinds of individuals, and not everyone in this age range is a snowflake, but a lot of them are.
Yeah. I mean, 74% are. I mean, 74% think it has a negative effect on young people's mental health. I'm sorry, if you believe being called a snowflake, even unfairly, has a negative effect on the entire group's mental health, you're probably a snowflake. I mean, seriously, I've been called a lot worse, and most of the times unfairly, and it didn't have any effect, neither on me or most of my generation. I mean, everyone has been called something quote unquote bad, and oftentimes unfairly, and it's for some reason it didn't have an effect on mental health, and most of them were called something a lot worse. Besides, I don't believe it is the case that the recent generations have somehow more mental health problems than previous generations. I mean, come on. 16 to 24-year-olds were called to fight a war 70 years ago. And if you are to believe official statistics, they somehow had fewer mental health issues than the individuals today of the same age group. So either those stats are wrong or these stats are wrong. I think these ones are wrong.
Yeah, and even assuming that the stats are entirely correct and that mental health problems are indeed on the rise, what evidence is there that this problem can be cured by treating young people even more sensitively, by taking even greater care about not hurting their feelings and so on? Because apparently there's, at least if you trust the statistics, there's a negative relationship between how caring you are of people's feelings and how mentally resilient they are.
Yeah.
So if anything, there would be an argument for more robust criticism, for more tough love and so on, and instead of more kid gloves.
Yeah. It's essentially inspiring more grit, which is something that we've been arguing for on this show for over 4 years now, and it will happen eventually. But sadly, another generation will have to be sacrificed, because that will be the current generation that's now in the schools. That's between the ages of 7 and 16. We're growing up with all of this nonsense now, with anything that could remotely theoretically cause offense is ultimately called for censorship. They might read the wrong fairy tale. They might hear that they're girls even though they are girls. All of that has to go because oh my god, what if it offends anyone? And it's going to take some time until enough people will start saying, you know what, so what? Yeah, it's offensive, so what? Who cares?
Yeah, and it turns people into mental midgets.
Yep.
If you never hear any challenging ideas, then how can you grow as a person? How can you develop? How can your own views be refined? Because for that to happen, you have to come into contact with different ideas, with ideas that go against your preconceived notions. But if that never happens, how can it develop?
Yeah, and this is essentially what I've been calling on my channel the one-directional translucid wall. We see how they think, but they don't see how the rest of us think. Because that's really what it is. We see into the safe spaces, we understand their arguments, and end up not trusting the argument or refuting the argument. But the other way around is not permitted. The believers in those types of arguments are not allowed to even hear our arguments because it might offend them. It's terrible.
Yeah, and it's a real problem because it means that that we, the people who are not on the social justice left, we also have a problem that we don't have, or we have very little actual worthy opposition who actually are familiar with our arguments and can counter our bad arguments. Because there's lots of people on our side who do make bad arguments. Just because you are generally on the right side doesn't mean that all your arguments are good or that your views are correct in everything. And these false arguments and false beliefs often just go unchallenged, and that's also a problem because there's so few people on the left who are even familiar with our arguments enough to form some sort of a response. That's not something that we've heard 100 times before.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of suppressing other sides of the argument, let's go to the next one.
Okay, coming from our friends at The Guardian, Facebook bans women for posting "men are scum" after harassment scandals. In the wake of multiple sexual harassment and abuse scandals across the globe, Facebook has been suspending women for hate speech against men after posting variations of the phrase, men are scum. Despite Facebook's chief operating officer Sheryl Sandberg warning of a potential backlash against women as scandals rock companies and political institutions, the social network continues to ban women speaking out against men as a group. New York-based stand-up comic Marcia Belsky was banned in October for 30 days from Facebook for posting "Men are scum" as a comment on her friend Nicole Silverberg's photo album, detailing the abuse Silverberg had received after writing a list of ways men can treat women better on Twitter, which was later published by The Guardian. Belsky told the Daily Dot this wasn't the first time Facebook had banned her for similar infractions, including jokes and innocuous comments warning about alleged sexual predators. Belsky is not alone in her censorship and bans by Facebook. Fellow comedian Kyla Avery says she routinely gets banned for comments such as "men are garbage fires," "the worst," "trash," and other derivatives. After several suspensions, Avery set up a community project called Facebook Jailed, highlighting the stories of those suffering similar bans for posting comments. A private Facebook group of about 500 female comedians also got together on the 24th of November to stage a protest, posting derivatives of "men are scum" all at once. Nearly every woman who took part in the protest got banned by Facebook, according to the Daily Beast. Facebook said Belsky's bans were a mistake and reinstated some of the comments. But according to recent posts by Avery, fellow comedian Elsa Waith, and others, Facebook is not only still banning people for posting new comments on the lines of "men are scum," but actively going through their timelines and deleting older posts about men. Part of the problem is Facebook's complicated moderating guidelines. Facebook says that threats and hate speech directed toward a protected group violate its community standards and are therefore removed. The social network told the Daily Beast that "men are scum" was a threat and therefore should be removed. Facebook's protected categories are based on race, gender, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and other factors. When hate speech is directed to a category, the guidelines are clear. The content must be removed. But according to ProPublica, when hate speech is directed at subsets of the categories, a greater latitude is afforded users. Many of the posts that have seen Belsky and others banned from Facebook have been in reply to direct attacks on them and friends with what many would consider hate speech. Facebook told the Daily Dot that specific attacks are reviewed as harassment, saying, "If I attack you for being a female, that would amount to hate speech. But if I attack you because I have something against journalists, that would qualify as harassment." One of the reasons the female comedians are being banned over and over is that Facebook operates an escalation policy with a record of previous incidents for repeat offenders. Each subsequent violation of Facebook community guidelines receives a heavier punishment. For privacy reasons, Facebook moderators also see content in isolation, which means that the context of the content, who has produced it, and the history could be very difficult to discern. Facebook said it was working hard to remedy harassment issues and has repeatedly stated that it wants the social network to be a safe and respectful space for all. After footage of shootings, murders, and rapes and assaults were streamed live on the site, Facebook said it was adding 3,000 extra moderators to its staff and that it would refine its moderation policies. Facebook told the Daily Dot that its policies team included a diverse range of people, including former teachers, prosecutors, and women who have worked in a rape crisis center, a spokesperson said. Quote, "The policies aren't developed in a vacuum. We consult with researchers and academics. We work with outside groups to get their feedback and expertise." A Facebook spokesperson told The Guardian, we understand how important it is for victims of harassment to be able to share their stories and for people to express anger and opinions about harassment. We allow those discussions on Facebook. We draw the line when people attack others simply on the basis of their gender."
We told you so. I mean, it's not like we haven't warned the feminists who have been the primary and the exclusive architect of these rules that this is eventually what will happen. Now, of course, we could afford to issue that warning because some of us, i.e. me and some of my teams, have said that, look, we were going to force you all to live up to your own book of rules. Because, you know, if that's how things are going to be, then that's how things are going to be. You can't have it both ways. You either have free speech or you don't. And if you don't, whatever rule you're going to try to enforce, we're going to make sure it's going to be enforced on you in a similar fashion. So in that regard, I regard this as good news. It's about bloody time militant misandry gets a little bit of a zuck.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't even consider this censorship. I mean, Facebook is a private platform. And I mean, these posts are not like reasonable expressions of opinion. It's just pretty much, it is what I would consider hate speech. Doesn't mean it should be illegal or anything like that, but I think it's perfectly reasonable for a private company to remove that sort of stuff from their platform. And I mean, if there were like a rule that you can't criticize a man or something like that, that would be ridiculous. But a rule that says you can't call all men scum, I think that's perfectly reasonable to have.
Yeah, well, again, there used to be a time when you could criticize anyone, including for stupid reasons and including mass group criticisms. That was the golden age of Facebook. It was between 2008 and 2013. Well, where yes, you would have some bad speech and some insanity, but you also have much more robust debate and discussion about anything really, which was fantastic. Then came the Safety Council of Feminists, part of it funded by our tax dollars via the Council of Europe, and started lobbying Facebook for all of these retarded rules. And Facebook eventually complied, and now they're complaining that, oh my God, Facebook complied and they're actually uniformly applying the rules we required. And if you click on that, because they quote there an article from ProPublica, if you click on that article, they're essentially saying, "Oh my God, we never thought that white men would also be considered a protected group." Oh,
What?
who would have thought white
White
men
men
are
are
also a racial and
people?
sexual group? Sorry?
Yeah, I mean, so basically they're astonished that white men are also people.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, basically.
I mean, it's also sort of strange that if these people believe that men are scum, then why do they insist on being on this platform that's created and for the most part operated by scum? I mean, do
Yeah.
we want to be on a scum website? Why?
Yeah.
Makes no
Uh,
sense.
yeah, if they really don't like it, they can set up their own social network, which they tried several times and it failed miserably every single time. But then again, they can try do that. It's not like there is an unalienable right to be on Facebook. And mind you, I say that as someone who is suspended routinely on Facebook most of the time for what I consider to be bullshit reasons. But it's their website, and if they want to suspend me, it's their right to do so. Just like it's also my right to try to subvert their rules every single time I have the occasion. That's how this game is being played. If you don't like the rules, then don't play the game. That's fine.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not particularly enamored of Mark Zuckerberg's politics or the sort of policies pursued by Facebook and many other large internet companies. But these people aren't scum. I mean, I have disagreements with them, and I think that someone's being quite unreasonable, but they're not scum. I mean, but if on the other hand, the biggest social media network were run by, I don't know, say actual Nazis or communists or something like that, then I wouldn't use it.
Yeah.
If it were if it were actually run by people who are completely terrible, completely reprehensible, then I wouldn't use their network, even if it is the biggest network. And if these people think that all men are scum, then I think they should do the same.
Yeah, just like I don't use VKontakte since it has been taken over and now is being operated by the KGB. I just don't use it. Why can those of us on the non-social justice bandwagon and non-feminists can exercise freedom of choice and feminists can't? I mean, it's really that simple. If you believe everyone there is scum, then that's fine. You're entitled to your belief, but put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And also don't believe for a second that these guidelines are evenly applied. I mean, I would be willing to bet that if you post some sort of thing that's not obviously hate speech under the guidelines, and you post it once um, targeted at men and the other time targeted at women, I'm willing to bet that you're much more likely to be banned for the anti-woman post. Completely certain of that.
For sure, for sure. As someone who's very experienced on Facebook, I've seen anti-feminist pages more often than not uh, suspended, shut down, whatever. Most of the time for bollocks reasons. Whereas explicit kill all men misandrist pages, you would need a lot more effort to get Facebook to do anything about it, even to look at it to see whether it breaches their policies, let alone actually do enforce some punishment on it. But in the end, most of the moderation, this is something that both everyone upset about Facebook's apparent, well, actually not apparent, but pretty random enforcement of its policies. Everyone on all sides of the argument needs to remember Facebook has most of it is automated. Because again, there are 1.7, something like that, 1.6 billion users, of which 1.2 billion are very active. There are hundreds of millions of statuses and pictures and whatnot shared or posted on Facebook every minute. There's just no way a team of 7,000 or whatever their staff is can actually moderate all of those. It's just not going to happen. Some of it is going to be automated, and yes, some of it might be wrong. Although in this case, it's not wrong. I think promoting that kind of blatant hatred against an entire sexual demographic on a private platform, yeah, I think that platform has a right to show you the door. You don't like it, don't use it. Tough.
Yep.
Right. Let's go to the next one. The next one, sadly, is not about social media, but about an actual country. France 24. Gender-based insults to become a legal offense, says Macron. French President Emmanuel Macron on Saturday unveiled measures aimed at educating the public and school children about sexism and violence against women and improving police support for victims. During his campaign, Macron, who won the presidential election in May, promised to rethink sexual politics and gender equality, which he made a national cause for his 5-year mandate. The Harvey Weinstein case, scandal in the United States, has accelerated a rethink of attitudes towards sexual harassment in France, a country that cherishes its self-image as the land of seduction and romance. Let's seal a pact of equality between men and women, Macron said in a speech marking the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. That sounds retarded. About violence and sexual abuse, he said, it is essential that shame changes camp. Gender-based insults will be punishable by law. Offenders will face a deterrent fine, he added. What a cunt. During his speech, Macron observed a minute's silence for the 123 women killed by their partner or ex-partner in 2016. Measures announced included educating secondary school children about pornography and simplifying the system for rape and assault victims to go to the police. Proposals that could be included in a 2018 draft law include criminalizing street harassment and extending the statute of limitation for the rape of minors to 30 years from 20 years. Macron also said he was personally in favor of setting the age of sexual consent at 15. Currently, France has no minimum age for sexual consent. That's actually false. Planned changes to the police system include allowing victims of rape and sexual assault to make their initial complaints online before going to a police station to bring criminal charges. Other measures include on-demand bus stops where women can stop a bus anywhere at night so they can get home safely. French feminist group Osez le Féminisme said the measures were going in the right direction, but must be accompanied by adequate funding. Without funding, any communication, training, awareness, or help plan for the victims will be useless, the statement said. France has often debated sexual harassment over the past decade following scandals involving French politicians. 6 years ago, a sex scandal forced former Finance Minister Dominique Strauss-Kahn to resign as head of the International Monetary Fund, provoking a round of soul-searching in France about sexual abuse that goes undetected in the upper echelons of power. Speaking of which, the Dominique Strauss-Kahn was a total and utter fabrication. 100% of the claims made against Dominique Strauss-Kahn were lies, and this is not my opinion, it's the opinion of multiple courts of law. who adjudicated the evidence. But for some reason, Franz van Katter doesn't mention that.
Yep.
This is terrible. This is terrible. We debated, me and my partner in crime, over the Romanian language channel. We debated this thoroughly, and we make a politics show that is mostly comedy, and that was the first time in over 1 year since we've been doing it when we were very serious, because this is cancer. This is serious cancer. All of the measures proposed are horror. Including this one, the extended the statute of limitation for the rape of minors to 30 years from 20 years. That's horrible, because that doesn't really help any serious victims. What does help is those who want to file false allegations. I mean, imagine this. I mean, you're in your 40s, and someone else in his 40s comes in and said, "You raped me when I was 12." How is that? How is that helped by anyone? Because how do you, first of all, how do you defend yourself legally against that? And how do you defend yourself in the court of public opinion against that?
Yeah, I mean, I think legally, presuming that there's still presumption of innocence in such cases, then it shouldn't be too hard to defend yourself legally. But I mean, what sort of evidence do you have after 30 years? Come on.
Yeah, that's exactly the point.
Maybe there's like a video recording or audio recording or something like that, but it's very unlikely. There may be some special cases where it can be proven, but in the vast majority of cases, there will be no evidence at all after 30 years.
Yeah, even after 20, I think, even 20, I think is too much. I think a statute of limitation for almost all serious crimes, including rape of minors, murder, all of those, 15 years is enough. 20 is already too much. 30 is atrocious. And again, this creates this never-ending, self-fulfilling prophecy, because then you will have one or two cases probably of someone saying, "Oh, that individual raped me 29 years ago." And then there will be a trial, and the trial will almost invariably end with a not guilty verdict. And then there will be more ammunition for these far left individuals and far left helicopterables to claim, "Oh my God, the system is rigged against the victims. It's reoppressing the victims. Look, the rapist walked scot-free."
Yeah.
This is horrible. As for the on-demand bus stops, seriously?
It's called a taxi.
Yeah. Well, I would say, or Uber, but then I remember this is socialist France. Uber is forbidden in France. So no Uber for you. Well, look, you care about the safety of women. How about re-legalize Uber? You can discreetly call a taxi. Nobody knows you even called a taxi. You can say it's your boyfriend picking you up and taking you to the exact address you want. There you go. Much cheaper than the state-enforced taxi monopoly. And also, you don't have to stop a bus in the middle of the street. So your precious feminine ass can get right where you want, whilst those of us on the non-feminine side of the humanity have to actually wait for our bus stop to actually go get off the bus.
Yeah, I mean, after all, men who are walking home at night might also be at risk and so on, and
they're actually at much higher risk.
Yeah, it might be the higher risk of becoming victims of violent crime, but who cares about that? I mean, they're men after all.
Yeah. Also, again, this whole nonsense of we're gonna educate schoolboys and school children about. Really? Who are you going to actually educate? I mean, has Macron even gone into the formerly working class school districts? Now they're full of the children of Islamists. Good luck educating those about, you shouldn't kiss someone under mistletoe without. I mean, seriously? Or you warn them about the danger of pornography. They already know about that. They think pornography is haram. You know what else they think? They think gender mixing is haram too. And they're going to behead you if you disagree. Just saying. I mean, this shows how disconnected the Macron administration really is. from essentially everyone. Amazing,
Yeah, I mean,
amazing.
what are they going to do? They're going to come into the schools and tell children there, rape is bad, okay?
Thou shalt not watch porn, okay? I mean, really, really. And again, I don't like this dishonesty. Oh, but it was the Harvey Weinstein case. Like anyone really gives a shit about that case. And the former finance minister Dominique Strauss-Kahn, whose allegations against whom were entirely fabricated, by the way. I mean, this is not justification. This is nonsense. This is excuse searching.
Yeah.
And by the way, speaking of the Harvey Weinstein scandal, I have yet to see any evidence of any crime being committed. Oh, yes, Harvey Weinstein is an asshole. Yeah, we already knew that. So what? Being an asshole is not a crime. I'm sorry, but I think most of the Me Too girls are lying through their teeth. And that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that they made a sexual deal, they profited from it, and when it was no longer profitable to keep up their end of the deal, they started whining about it. Which I think is the majority of the cases, but we'll get to that soon enough. But again, what does that have to do with France? It doesn't. If anything, the French culture, and we spoke about this in previous episodes, the French culture is entirely different than the American one. Most of the things that uh, Weinstein is allegedly to have done are actually quite mainstream in France and appreciated by the public, or at the very least ignored by the public. I mean, we have to remember, this is the country where the mistress of the president would get into the president's palace, the Elysee Palace, through the front door. And the press was like, oh, yeah, by the way, the mistress stopped by the president's today. That's pretty much it. I mean, and this was in the 80s when François Mitterrand was the president of France. It's not something really weird. In France, France is not a country of Puritan and sexually frustrated Puritans like the United States pretends to be, because the United States isn't like that either. It's just that some pearl clutching pseudo elites claim it is.
Yep.
Amazing. No, I mean, seriously, this one is really infuriating because if even half of these things go through, it will make a lot worse. It will make things a lot worse than they are right now. Or at best, they will do nothing. And if they will do nothing, then the feminists will use that as a self-fulfilling prophecy that nothing is enough, and then demand even more, and undermine whatever civilized society is left.
International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. So they're setting up this impossible goal: no violence against women, nowhere. Not reduce violence against women, but eliminate it, which is never going to happen. So therefore, society is always flawed, and they always have license to include new stupid laws to fix this apparent problem. And I mean, obviously, violence against women is bad, so is violence against men. But having this sort of unfulfillable goal of eliminating violence against an entire sex is just insanity. It's not going to work. It's setting an impossible standard, and measuring a country by an impossible standard is not going to lead to good results.
Yeah, but they know that too. They're using it just to give themselves my apologies, an unlimited mandate.
Yep.
Basically, and we've heard feminists use that in the past too. In India, for instance, they say, "Oh, when no woman is ever affected in any way by dowry harassment, then we might consider repealing the brutally retarded anti-dowry harassment law that leads to the death of hundreds of thousands of innocent men every year in India." Same thing in Europe. We've heard feminists say, "Oh, when no rape is ever occurring, then maybe we can think about false rape allegations." Well, really, that's how convenient. That's almost as saying, well, when a perpetuum mobile will be built, then we might consider whether efficient engines are good or not. Well, really?
Yep.
Amazing. Right.
But we have
Let's
to
go.
move on.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. Then the next one is insanity from my own place, of course.
Yay!
Yay, not really. Coming from a similar reason, I think Macron dictated this law or the other way around. Anyway, profit.rom, a new obligation for companies. If they have over 50 employees, they must hire an expert or a technician in equality of opportunity. Failing to do so would come with a fine up to 100,000 lei, that's about 22,000 euros. Private companies with over 50 employees have the obligation to include in their organization an expert or a technician in equality of opportunity. In the case where they can't identify a person with the appropriate training, the companies can also put the task to one of their existing employees, according to a bill draft proposal by members of the government. Failing to abide by this obligation would come with fines starting from 3,000 lei and up to 100,000 lei. The argument for this is that worldwide, 35% of women are victims of gender based violence in the workplace, and between 40 and 50% of women are subjected to unwanted sexual advances, unwanted physical contact, and other forms of sexual harassment. 45% of the women in the European Union declare they have been subjected to gender based violence at least once, and between 40 and 45% declare they've been victims of workplace sexual harassment. According to the draft, the person designated with attributions in the field of equal opportunity must go through training within 2 years from the date one has been given this task. The project does not include details on how this would work. Presumably, these would be established through the enforcement methodological norms should the project be approved. The Parliament has the final say on whether this project will be applied in any shape. And then the article goes on to actually quote the bill, which sounds just as retarded as the summary sounds. Um, yeah, that's what happens when you stay at home and the Social Democrats get to win. Yeah, the good news is that well, I've spoken already with several members of the parliament, including members of the parliament of the Labor Commission, which are the first ones to basically decide if this goes into a full vote or not. And all of them are like, yeah, how about no? How about you shove your proposal back where it came from? So it probably won't pass. Even if it will pass, I was debating this with the leftist, and I was telling him, look, even if it does pass in this format, if I were a company director or CEO or whatever, I would put the most anti-feminist person in the organization as an expert or technician in equality of opportunity, and say, yeah, I'm going to train them, and after 2 years, I'm going to move the because you have 2 years to school them, train them into whatever nonsense they're thinking about, and after 1 year and 11 months, just shift the responsibility to another anti-feminist employee for another 1 year and 11 months. And whenever there is an audit coming in, say, yeah, of course we have a technician for that. Here's the individual who's been tasked to it, and the individual will say, yeah, well, we've evaluated things, not a problem here. Get lost. Which is exactly what most companies would do if this were to pass. Nevertheless, this is the kind of thing that comes, on sort of a party line lockstep thingy. I mean, it's not a coincidence that it comes from the political party associated with Martin Schulz's Social Democrats. It's not a coincidence that it's not coming from anywhere else. And it also it comes with the same retarded arguments. Oh, worldwide, 35% of women are victims of even if that were true, I don't care. What's that got to do with this country? Nothing.
Yeah, but I guess that a lot more men are victims of gender-based violence.
Maybe.
I mean, you just have to be. I assume it's just you have to be. You have to receive some sort of violence because of your gender at some point in your life, and I think most men have been beaten or punched or something in once in a lifetime at least. And this sort of treatment usually does not before women. It's usually specifically targeted at men. So most men have been victims of gender-based violence. Okay,
Yeah.
so what?
Yeah, that's an interesting argument. I should remember it. But yeah, again, so what? Also, I do question this. 45% of women in the EU declare they've been subjected to gender-based violence at least once. I remember deconstructing that particular study. It's on the pages of avoicefrommen.com. It's the same study that they still keep on quoting now. It's called "The EU Should Stop Cooking the Numbers," in which I basically proved that uh, all of the claims made there are either severely exaggerated or outright false. And again, even if that were true, the European Union is not a country. That doesn't. It nowhere does it say that if something is true EU wide, is necessarily true in every single country. I mean, after all, well, the vast majority of sexual harassment claims come from Sweden. So why should France or Romania pass laws that would maybe apply to Sweden, if we are to believe that in Sweden nobody lies about rape, which would be insane to believe, but let's play their game for half a second.
Yeah, I don't know about the vast majority of that coming from Sweden. I mean, Sweden is a rather small country. Maybe you mean like a vast disproportionate amount?
A disproportionate, sorry, yeah, not
Yeah.
the vast majority, but a disproportionate amount, yeah. And again, it is still comparing smaller countries with bigger countries. I mean, you know, if you use percentages, that means, you know, let's say that the same percentage is true in every single country. Then that means you would have 5 cases in Estonia, 100 cases in Slovenia, and 100,000 cases in France. Which one is worse? You know, just saying. I mean, this whole playing with the percentages is just not an argument. And the reason they're using this as an argument, the government is using this as an argument, is because every single local study that was made ended up with very politically incorrect results. You know, those results that we have seen in Western Europe too, namely that women prefer to have male bosses, namely that most women are like, yeah, we actually like the male domination. No, thank you, we don't want any quotas. Goodbye. So they don't want to use the local studies, because if they do, then that would mean the such laws are retarded. So instead they use this wishy-washy internationalist bullcrap, probably dictated to them by the central office of the Party of European Socialists.
Yep.
Right. Let's go to the next one. Oh, the next one is my favorite one. Go ahead.
Next one is coming from the BBC. Why women fear backlash over MeToo. That whispering you hear from American women right now, it's not elation, it's anxiety, the fear of a backlash. Just 2 months since the Harvey Weinstein accusations emerged, women here are already concerned that this revolution will indeed eat its own. This is a surprisingly controversial topic because even raising a potential backlash against the MeToo movement smacks of appeasement, or wanting to let predators off the hook. There are women who say it's been so unfair for so long that if a few innocent men get wrongfully accused, that's a price they're happy to pay. I'm a lot more comfortable with the first half of that sentiment than the second. To be clear, no one wants to stop this movement. We want to keep it alive in a way that creates safe workplaces and ends up helping women rather than hurting us. Publicity and exposure are helping to change the culture, but the power of this seismic shift must be harnessed with care. This is not a witch hunt. The biggest backlash risk is a fake accusation that will undermine genuine accusers. Whether for personal, vindictive reasons or for political, strategic reasons, a woman will falsely accuse a high-profile man of sexual misconduct, the story will get attention, and then when it's proven to be fake, the backlash will begin. The response will quickly be, you see, all these stories aren't true. Women are making it up. The next fear is that men will get so nervous that they're going to be accused of harassment that they will simply stop hiring, meeting, or socializing with female colleagues. There are reports that this is already happening. We will get shut out of the room where important decisions are made because men fear our presence. How ironic would that be? It's known here as the Pence rule after Vice President Mike Pence, who said he doesn't ever meet alone or have dinner alone with female colleagues in order to avoid any perception of impropriety. That can hinder female professionals by excluding us from work occasions that men can and do take advantage of. The question of who stands as judge and jury is also a cause for concern. There's often no corroborating evidence in cases of historic abuse, no witnesses or photographs. We are all still learning how to distinguish what seems credible and what doesn't. Women's stories of harassment should be believed, and they often haven't been in the past, but they should also be able to withstand scrutiny. As in all reporting, due diligence is as necessary here as ever. As we get more accounts of fake accusers trying to discredit real accusers, this need for scrutiny will grow. Women are tough enough to withstand fair questions. The final reason is also the most complex because it raises the thorny issue of relativity. Are all incidents of harassment the same and equally egregious? Do some apologies count for more than others? Women have a lot of passionate views on those questions, and there's no single right answer. The backlash fear here is that if all these cases of bad behavior are treated equally, this could quickly become a vendetta in which lots and lots of men are implicated and punished. Men will be seen as the bad guys simply for the crime of being male. Already men are nervously asking what's acceptable and what's not. Is all flirting now banned? Is a pat on the back okay, but a pat on the bottom always a sackable offense? This confusion could fast turn to anger. The risk is that men, feeling under siege, kick back and say, enough is enough, this is not fair. Then we risk losing the support and sympathy of our male colleagues. We do indeed become seen as witch hunters, or worse, as witches. To be clear, men who have sexually abused and harassed women should be called out. But we are all learning in this process. And finding out that harassment, as in most areas of life, what initially seemed such a simple case of black and white, actually has shades of confusing grey. A backlash now against women would be the worst thing that can happen. It would shove this topic back under the carpet for years. So let's tread carefully, act soberly, and use this moment with the willing support of our male colleagues to make our workplaces safer and happier.
I disagree. A backlash now against women would be the absolutely best thing that can happen.
Yes,
and
it
yes,
would.
it would shove the topic back under the carpet for years. So what? Go ahead, James.
No, I have no sympathy at all.
Yeah.
None. Zilch, zero. Hey, look, if the voters want to allow feminism to speak for them, deal with the consequences. They're the ones that voted all these people into office. They're the ones that kept on pushing over and over again. They have allowed these people to gain the power that they have. They could have stopped this a long time ago. They didn't. Let them deal with the consequences of their actions.
Yep. I mean, it is always a case when something like something so insane becomes big enough in a culture or in a country. At one moment, one has to ask, wait a second, this didn't happen out of nowhere. There is some responsibility to be had by your average voter, your average people. Your average people tolerated this. Not for a year, not for two, but for decades, for over half a century. Well, maybe they deserve it. Just saying.
Hey, there's no bailout in this.
Oh yeah. No.
And with a number of men going their own way, that's gonna hit people right where it counts. In the pocketbook, with reduced taxation, right in the relationship scenario, you're gonna see a bunch of guys dropping off the grid. All these articles that we see right now complaining about where are the good men, give it 10 years and see what happens. They'll be screaming to the rafters at the top of their lungs, and you're going to have an entire generation of men going, fuck you.
Yeah, and please help yourself to all the feminist men. You're welcome to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Those are the men you want, because they're going to talk out of one side of their mouths and dick you in the ass in the other.
Yiannopoulos is correct on this one. Whenever you hear someone describing himself as a male feminist, you can start the clock on the rape charge. It's just so true, isn't it?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. It's probably one of the reasons why.
Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens in 20 or 30 years once we've got a generation that's pretty much checked out and said fuck you.
We don't even have
I can almost promise the incentives that are going to be put in place to bring us back in is going to destroy feminism and likely likely relativism as well.
That would be fantastic. Yeah, but I've been thinking about that too. I made this recently a video on sexual politics with a very similar conclusion, although I think it will take a little bit more than 30 years, probably around 50. But one way or the other, this kind of purulent bubble will have to break. Because in sexual politics is pretty much like in economics. What cannot go on will not go on. Especially considering that the more time passes, the more the social justice left pushes harder. They get brutal, more insane than ever. I mean, 1 year ago, this entire story would have been unthinkable. Which is why I kind of congratulate myself when I said in 2013 that whenever you think you've seen peak leftism, just wait for another 5 minutes.
Hey, it's either this or the feminists will learn the hard way whenever population generation rates get so low that, well.
Yeah, Islamization is one way to end this. I mean, nobody's saying that, that ending this is necessarily going to be happy.
Exactly.
And, this article would have been very welcomed 2 months ago, the next day after the Me Too. Maybe I would have believed this author to be sincere. Now, no, sorry, Cupcake, it's way too late. If this article would have been not about Me Too, but about false sexual harassment claims in general and had been published 3 years ago, maybe I would have believed the author is sincere. Now, sorry, not buying it. Not buying it. And the next it says here, she the author says, oh, men will get nervous, and that this is already happening. It's not there are reports that this is already happening, and it's getting increasingly to be the norm. And I think that's good. I don't think that's bad. Oh, it will affect some women.
And nobody wants to report that side of it either. Nobody is talking about the number of men that are checking out. You're hardly seeing anything about it. They don't want to say it because then it's an admission that they done fucked up.
Yeah, I would love to see some reporting, even biased reporting about it, because I would be curious about some of the numbers. What I've been observing in the corporate world in my recent business-related travels doesn't look good at all. It's a lot more prevalent than we're led to believe, and this is in Europe, where the hysteria is a lot less, dialed up to 11 like it is in the States. This thing is coming. This thing is coming, and whilst it will have some short-term negative effects, I don't care.
That's okay. Feminists won't be happy until men are out of most of the entertainment jobs over here in the U.S. and every channel becomes a Lifetime channel.
And every comedian becomes Amy Schumer.
Oh God!
Oh God!
And every fashion model.
That's horrible. But still, it's probably worth it. It's probably worth it. Because then maybe some things will change. I mean, either everyone will have to become the Allah channel, or maybe some common sense will get back. Either of the two outcomes, I think it's acceptable at this point. But yeah, I mean, I've made in the videos in the past praising the Mike Pence rule. I think it's good in a climate like this one. It's the best rule you can have. Does it hinder female professionals? Yes. Do I care? No. Should anyone care? Absolutely not. If women are so pissed off about this, then they should shut down the feminists. Maybe we do need a real life, wider society equivalent of #NotYourShield. But until I see that happening, I will refuse to give a damn whatever women might be hindered professionally. That men are like, fuck this shit. No, I'm not getting alone with a woman without surveillance. No, I don't care if her professional career gets hindered. So what? I'm under no obligation to mentor anyone. Get lost.
Yeah, I mean, this whole narrative that the MeToo campaign is raising an important issue, but maybe it's gone a bit too far. No, it's not the case. It's fundamentally flawed. This whole idea that when it's been taking sexual assault seriously is nonsense. It's the exact opposite. Sexual assault, at least sexual assault against women, is already something that we have vastly too much. We have vastly too much interest in that. There's vastly too much condemnation of that relative to other offenses. We're already in a society where touching a woman's spots is somehow worse than punching someone in the face and knocking them out. At least in terms, in Germany, in terms of the jail sentences you can get for both these crimes. Knocking someone out by sucker punching them in the face is apparently a lesser offense than touching someone's bum.
Yeah,
that makes absolutely no bloody sense.
Of course it doesn't. And it's further reason for why the hashtag MeToo, it doesn't make a good point at all. It should not have existed, period.
Yeah, if some sort of politician it gets out that 20 years ago he was in some sort of bar fight and knocked out some guy, no one's going to care very much. I mean, someone's going to report on this, but most people are just going to shrug their shoulders. But if it comes out that he inappropriately touched a woman by putting his hand on her knee or something, it can ruin your career. That's bloody insane. We already pay a vast disproportionate amount of attention to all sorts of sexual misconduct, and the MeToo campaign only makes things worse.
Yeah, and what you just said, all of these cases predate the hashtag MeToo campaign. So it was already an insane climate before MeToo showed up on the stage. And then this author comes in and says, oh yeah, but women's stories of harassment should be believed. No, they shouldn't. No, they shouldn't. The fundamental premise on any allegation of any crime should be, you're full of shit. Show me your evidence.
Yep.
I know that sounds, insensitive and whatnot. I don't care. That's exactly the same treatment that is awarded to, murder charges and theft charges and sucker punching and everything else. Why should sexual harassment be in any way different? No, it isn't.
Well, Sheryl Sandberg, Facebook COO, has talked about this as well, the exact same thing, worrying about the backlash over what's going on with Me Too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
it's not like, the individual expressing their opinion here isn't just alone. We've got a major individual in business who is talking about this as well.
I'm glad for them. I hope the backlash is coming, and I hope it gets as harsh as possible. Because something needs to give, and the need for a backlash hasn't been more striking in years. And they say here, oh, but then we risk losing the support and sympathy of our male colleagues. Yes, that's good. That's feature, not a bug. As far as I'm concerned, any man supporting the hashtag MeToo campaign is at best a wuss, and at worst an enemy of civilization. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, people can also be mistaken or confused.
Yeah. One can be a wuss, an ignorant. Okay, fair enough. I do concede that not every single supporter of the Me Too campaign is an enemy of civilization or someone who has bad intentions. I can definitely agree with that. But I cannot agree that any supporter of the Me Too campaign is well-intended. In the sense that their support is not well-intended. Their support is a good thing. No, it's a bad thing, no matter who does it. And of course, people have been doing bad things with good intentions since forever. That's the essence of most dictatorships. You know,
Not just
most,
most dictatorships, but like most government in general.
yeah, and most government in general. True, yes. So, you know, just because, oh, but yeah, but some of them aren't evil, they're just well intended. So what? So what?
Yep.
You know, Ceausescu didn't think of himself as evil at all. He was, you know, two days before he was executed, while he was shooting down protesters, he was arguing his position in humanistic secular terms. He was very convinced of him being good. He wasn't. Same thing here. Destroying the civilization is not something good, even if it's done with good intentions, or allegedly good intentions. Speaking of good intentions, let's go to the next one.
Okay, coming from Switzerland, from the Neue Zürcher Zeitung. SP wants to reverse burden of proof in cases of sexual harassment, and the SP is the Social Democratic Party in Switzerland. Victims of sexual assault should no longer have to present affirmative evidence for the crime. Instead, the alleged perpetrator would have to prove his innocence. This left-wing proposal is highly controversial. The timing is pure coincidence. On the day before accusations of harassment against the CVP member of the National Council, Yannick Buté, however you pronounce that, emerged, another Vâlsan member of the National Council handed in a proposal designed to better protect the victims of sexual assault. And the CVP is the conservative-ish party, or actually officially a formally conservative party in Switzerland. In his parliamentary initiative, Matthias Reinhardt of the SP, the Social Democrats, demands a so-called reversal of the burden of proof in cases of sexual harassment. That would mean that a person who makes an accusation of misconduct would no longer have to prove it. It would be sufficient if they're able to make a credible case. It would then be up to the alleged perpetrator to prove their innocence. The law on equalization already includes the reversal of the burden of proof for other forms of discrimination, such as with pay or the lack of promotions. That sexual harassment is not part of this is quote-unquote disquieting, according to Reinhardt. In this initiative, he cites a survey by the State Office of Commerce from 2007, according to which 18% of employees had already been subject to sexual harassment at the workplace. And according to a study by the Geneva University, lawsuits about harassment did not end in favor of the accuser in more than 80% of cases. Quote, the main reason for this is the difficulty of proving the events in question, Reinhardt emphasizes. He points out that this reversal of the burden of proof had already happened in France and Germany. Reinhardt is adopting a proposal which the UNIA, which is the largest Swiss labor union, has long been in favor of. Corinna Scherer, the member of the leadership team in charge of issues of equalization, hopes that this proposal will have better chances than earlier attempts, such as the one by former Green National Council member Franziska Teuscher. Her parliamentary initiative was roundly defeated in 2011. Quote, but much has changed since then, in part thanks to the courageous women who have come out as part of the MeToo campaign and who have removed some of the taboos surrounding this topic, Scherer says. In her view, the reversal of the burden of proof frees victims from the emotionally difficult task of collecting evidence. But isn't there the danger of false accusations? How is an alleged perpetrator supposed to prove they did not touch a colleague inappropriately or harass her verbally in a situation without witnesses? Scherer does not believe that someone would easily accuse another person of sexual harassment. Quote, it's an issue that involves a lot of shame. People don't usually invent such stories just to harm someone. Moreover, he argues that cantonal arbitration agencies, where such cases often end up, have a lot of experience. Quote, they're quite capable of determining whether or not an accusation is credible. In the end, the arbitrators of the courts had to decide whether an employer took sufficient measures to protect employees against discrimination. Whether the arguments of the left are able to convince the bourgeois majority, and this sort of word bürgerliche Parteien is something that's like untranslatable, so I translated it with bourgeois. It's some sort of
the group of bourgeois parties is the same thing they use in Sweden. Basically, anyone who is not a communist is the bourgeois party.
Not necessarily that, but like more sort of the conservative, classic liberal-ish kind of parties.
Anyone who is not a socialist, a social democrat, a communist.
Yeah, something like that. So, where the arguments of the left are able to convince the bourgeois majority in the parliament is doubtful. During the debate on the last proposal 6 years ago, Barbara Schmidt-Federer, CVP member of the National Council, said that easing the burden of proof for the harassed person vis-à-vis the employer would lead to a restriction on the presumption of innocence for the harassing employer. And this in turn would have consequences for the accompanying criminal case against the alleged perpetrator. Quote, the presumption of innocence, an important pillar of the rule of law in criminal law, would necessarily be curtailed, Schmidt-Federer emphasized. After all, it would be hard to imagine a case against the employer finding that sexual harassment occurred, while the accompanying criminal case finds that it didn't. In addition, the majority in the legal committee pointed out that there often were no objectively provable facts in cases of sexual harassment, which made them different from wage discrimination against women, for example.
Right.
So,
that backlash cannot come fast enough. Yeah, the backlash cannot come fast enough, and the fact that there are such elected officials who can even think like that tells me everything I need to know about where we stand as a baseline, and it's not looking good. And again, all of this is possible because a significant minority, I don't think there are a majority, they never have been, but a significant minority of voters are either ignorant of evil or actively support evil. It's just the way it is. Yep. I mean, if this individual gets elected again, whenever the next time there are the federal elections in Switzerland, then that means those voters are directly responsible, whether they like it or not, of evil. Because this is anti-civilizational evil. It's just, there's no way to work around this.
Yeah, and however important you think it is to protect women from sexual harassment, the rule of law kind of is more important.
Yeah, and also I don't believe someone would make up. Oh, yes, I do believe. And guess what? There has been significant evidence that people do make up stories. And you know, it's very funny that they quote the MeToo, which most of those aren't even crimes, even if they are to be true. And as you look further, most of them turn out to be bollocks anyway. So yeah, people do make up stories whenever it's convenient for them. And you know, considering that most of these are deemed to be, you know, worthy of various compensation from those secretive arbitration courts and whatnot, yeah, that's convenient. That's motive right there.
And I mean, this Scherer woman says that people don't usually invent such stories just to harm someone. Well, I agree, people don't usually do that. But I mean, the vast majority of women would not accuse someone falsely of sexual harassment or sexual assault, but some would. Just like most men wouldn't sexually harass someone or sexually assault someone, but some would. And for that, we have criminal courts to establish that sort of stuff. And just to say, you know, because this crime is hard to prove, therefore we don't have to prove it, is bullshit.
Yeah. And that statistic that they quote there, 80% of the arbitration trials went in favor of the accuser. Yeah, but 20% didn't. And under your system, 100% of them would go in front of the accuser. In favor of the accuser.
80% went in favor of the accused.
Of the accused. Oh, that's even worse. That's even worse. So that means only 20% were somewhat legit, and 80% were somewhat bollocks. Because again, there's no way to establish beyond reasonable doubt. So you know, just because
80% said was the person accused was not guilty in 80% of the cases.
Yeah,
that's why they're complaining. Yeah.
Yeah. So 80% were somewhat bollocks, basically. So 80% of the complaints, and 20% were somewhat true or true enough to go through to pass court mustard, or actually arbitration court mustard, which is already a lower standard. So
yeah,
under their system, 100% would go in favor of the accuser.
You just have to establish that it's credible. I mean, I can easily make up a credible story of someone harassing me. Even I, as a man, probably could come up with a story that someone might find credible. And if I'm a young, attractive woman, it would be a piece of cake. And then you have this credible story. You know, this guy harassed me when we were alone. There's kindly proof that he didn't do it.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah. And when you make these things very easy, which is something that I forgot to mention at the Macron story, I think they deserve some trolling. I mean, Macron deserves to have rape accusations filed against him on his website, which he'll set up for women to file rape charges. The same here. I mean, if they're gonna set up this, which I don't think they will, because Switzerland generally tends to have a majority sensible voting public. But if they were to ever do this, the first thing that I would do would be to set up to file stories against the initiators of this law, because it's not complicated. I mean, if you give me the law translated from, give it to me in French so I can understand it. I can make up a story that fits impeccably with the criteria that they established. It's not hard.
Yep.
Sure, most people won't, but I would. I'm not. Right. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, the next one is from Germany, from Spiegel. Between maternal love and vigilante justice. A woman from Berlin absconds to Thailand with her daughter. With the help of the German police, the child is brought back to the father, who has full custody. Now the mother has been sentenced to jail. In the end, the court rules against Claudia K. The Berlin-born woman is sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in prison for abducting a minor. The district court Tiergarten is convinced that the 45-year-old took her daughter and left for Thailand by way of Malta, even though the father of the 9-year-old girl had sole custody. In her opinion, Judge Ulrike Hauser does not mince words with K. What you're doing is vigilante justice, the judge said to K. And she said that Kay disregarded the decision of the courts and put her own judgment above anyone else's. Early on in the trial, it becomes apparent that the accused has been doubting the judgment of German judges for years. Quote, if no one in Germany is willing to help me, then I have to take my daughter and leave. These are the words with which defending lawyer Kai Joachimsen sums up the attitude of his client. What the presiding judge called vigilante justice, I call self-defense, he tells journalists after the main trial. The defendant has been in investigative custody since the 14th of July. This time, and especially the years preceding it, have left marks on her face. Her eyes are red, her eyelids heavy, her face furrowed. Everything she did had been for one reason, she says. I want to protect my child because she is not safe. The dangers from which she wants to protect the child emanate from the father, Kay says. She accuses him of abuse. The defendant and the lawyer speak of aches in the lower abdomen, which her daughter allegedly had every time she came back from her father's. These accusations are grave, but apparently groundless. Family courts in the past regarded them as not credible, and the criminal court was not convinced either. Accusations of accused are sure to outrage Child Protective Services and family courts, Judge Hauser explains after reading the verdict. In the case of the 9-year-old's father, however, the family court had not intervened. Quote, that means the accusations simply weren't true, Hauser says. And there's a couple of paragraphs detailing how a few years before that, the mother, who back then apparently had like shared custody, abducted the daughter and went with her to Uruguay. And then the father, after some time, managed to find her and bring her back. And after this, the mother lost all custody rights. And then she abducted her again and took her to Thailand. And it also took the guy a couple of years to find them. And it was sort of more or less a coincidence that like some person tipped him off, and that story is gone into in great detail here. And then it continues. The 9-year-old daughter has been back in Berlin for a few months now. Quote, she goes to 3rd grade, works hard, has reconnected with old friends and made new ones, the father says. Over the last few years, the girl was taught by her mother. According to her testimony, the accused could not enroll her daughter in a school as that would have risked discovery by the father. The mother's homeschooling had been relatively thorough, though, the father says. The daughter was able to reintegrate into school, but hadn't been quite ready for 4th grade. She is receiving psychological care, but there does not seem to be any lasting damage. The worst seems to be over for the daughter, but the things which were mentioned on this day in criminal courtroom of Moabit raise questions that are connected to Claudia K., but seem to go beyond her case. After reading her verdict, Judge Ulrike Hauser speaks of structures that she suspects behind the kidnapping. Quote, "There's much evidence that more people had to be involved to enable her to leave the country." She refers to the dubious role of the people in the German embassy. These apparently also illegally provided documents in the second abduction case. Among the evidence supporting this suspicion is the fact that Kay was able to illegally procure travel documents in Malta. Moreover, in his final statement, the father's lawyer points to the role that might have been played by a Berlin-based mothers organization. He questions whether the mother would have been able to leave the country without this organization's help. The organization is currently not the subject of any investigation. Before the trial, Bild quoted Raphael Knispel, the chairman of the Association of Berlin Prosecutors. Quote, "Neither the police nor the prosecution are able to investigate with the necessary depth and breadth because they are too overworked."
Yeah, that's a very good point at the end of the article, because while you were reading it, I was kept on asking myself, how the hell did she even got from Germany to Malta, and then from Malta to Thailand, and cross so many borders after already having once done that, and have her child taken away by the courts? I mean, there has to be someone else involved.
Yep.
Maybe not an entire structure, but at least one other person, someone who knew somebody who could do this, who could make this happen. Some acquaintance. I mean, it's not something you can just pull out on your own just because potato. There has to be someone else who has helped with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that after she already kidnapped this daughter once, she's able to get away with it again. There aren't any sort of protections there, no sort of warning bells going off anywhere that this woman is someone who's previously been guilty of abducting a daughter. You can just do it again, no problem. No one stopped her at airport security or anything like that. That does raise a lot of questions.
It doesn't really add up, because I've traveled with a family once. It was the mother and the child, and we were going into a non-EU country, going to reunite with the father of the child, and we still got a crap ton of questions, even though and she had to show up. Look, we have notarized papers authorizing me, the mother, to take the kid from this country to this country for a medical exam, and then take him back, and here's the father agreeing with that, and here's this person, that would be me, helping us in this country and in this country. And we had to answer a crap ton of questions, even though everything was entirely legit and everyone agreed. And in one airport, they actually asked to speak personally with the father, so we had to give them a phone and call him, for crying out loud. So that's why I'm suspicious about how she managed to pull this off all by herself, just playing stupid. I just don't think that works like that.
Yep.
Someone else helped her. Now, of course, the judge has to play some legalistic lingo here, say, oh, the structures. I don't think it was necessarily a structure, as in a big time conspiracy, but something has to be there. Something has to be more into this story.
Yeah, it might well be this sort of mother's organization that the father's lawyer speaks of.
I wouldn't be surprised.
After all, you all know that women never lie about such accusations. So if she accuses her former husband of child abuse, then obviously it must be true. And we know that society is so patriarchal that obviously they wouldn't remove an abuser from his child. So obviously you have to take justice in your own hands.
Yeah, and I remember reading. I think you translated it or someone else, but I remember reading an article from the German manosphere, written by an academic. I don't remember his name, who mentioned that these kinds of mothers' organizations, domestic violence shelters, whatever, are not just hotbeds of misandry. That is something to be expected, but they're also full of individuals very willing to help mothers, essentially, and women in general, to break the law if that forwards the worldview of those who set up those shelters and organizations. So I wouldn't be particularly surprised if that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, this has been a known problem for many years. And in a way, I do understand the prosecutor's office saying also that, well, look, the police and the prosecutor's office is just too overworked. There's no way we could investigate this. But still, maybe some of this deserves further investigation.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the second to last, the article that made the news section appear unassailable. Coming from forskning.no, which is a portal where they detail research in general. The armed forces do not want to see negative research results on military duty for women. It's a very long article. I'm going to read less than a quarter of it. Quote, Norway is the only NATO country that has introduced universal military service obligations for women. Defense researchers believe it is quite sensational that there is no research on such a major historical change. Lieutenant Colonel Harald Høibæk at the Defense College has a doctorate in philosophy. He regards the he observes the armed forces from the inside with academic glasses. He recently released the book Defense, A Critical Look from the Inside. There is no military justification for universal female service in Norway, Høibæk strikes. He finds that instead it is about ideology that the authorities want women in the armed forces. We should be honest enough to say that women's rights are so important here in Norway that we're willing to reduce compatibility. It is a political will that it would be a good thing, somehow, for the general public to conscript women. We do not discuss what is the most important thing, namely if our defense works the day it is being put to the test. It may be because we basically don't believe that war concerns us here in Norway. Just researching, that war concerns here in Norway. Another chapter, skipping a bit, just researching what they want to know. The philosopher Lieutenant Colonel just does not think it's interesting for the Ministry of Defense to know if girls shoot worse than guys, for instance, or whether they carry their bags the day it gets serious. The Defense Department is currently researching what they want to know about. They put away research on what they prefer not to know anything about, says Høibæk. He shows us the letter of rejection he and the Defense College recently received on a research application sent to the Ministry of Defense. It says that research should support the policy. Quote, one point in the assessment was that the projects should be able to deliver rapid results for the implementation of the department's policies and support the design of new policies. From several teams, there must have been feedback that girls are struggling with the physical demands that the Army poses to become approved military soldier. The Armed Forces Forum wrote this autumn, with Heron as the source, that it happens to recruit more women to the first-time service. A total of 22% of the girls who made it through the first round of the session did not meet the minimum requirement for fitness, strength, or overall ability, as it turned out. For the boys, the corresponding proportion was only 2%. The Army later went out and wanted to correct the press reports. They reported that they lowered the requirements for both women and men to qualify for first-time employment. Høibæk believes that this has great costs for fighting ability to bring in many women in the armed forces. In the vast majority of areas in society, there is no doubt that it is beneficial to acquire competence from the entire population and not just half of it. But the values that are reasonable in civil society are not as reasonable in a military setting. Høibæk believes it is sensible and relevant that the operational forces also contain women. Sometimes the women are needed in the front row, doors are kicked in and ceilings fall down. Also on the intelligence side, it can be very sensible. But it is quite obvious that compatibility decreases if you recruit women into combatants at the expense of well-trained men. Skipping a lot more. Nina Rons, researcher at the Armed Forces Research Institute, thinks it is sensational that the civil research community is so interested in implementing such a historically important reform. The reform is unique into the Western world. It also has major societal significance for women and men in Norway. Therefore, it is strange that both the evaluation of universal service and other matters related to the armed forces are left to the armed forces alone, she believes. There is hardly any research on the armed forces from other than the armed forces itself, or research that is not funded by the Ministry of Defense and their needs. Rons agrees with Høibæk that fighting ability is not something Norwegian research is interested in. She thinks there is an interesting difference between Norwegian and international defense research on this topic. The resistance to women in the armed forces in Norway has been centered around women's physical capacity and a sense of injustice linked to women's access to education and attractive positions. Americans and British have worried specifically whether women will threaten the military brotherhood and the unity of the military units. This is due to the fact that unity has been seen as a supportive part of soldiers' motivation and willingness to keep fighting with life as an effort. Many have suggested that homogeneity is crucial. Heterogeneity, and especially with regard to gender and sexuality, is a threat. This has contributed to the exclusion of conflicting elements like women and gays from conflicting positions, Rhodes believes. Recent research on this subject, however, shows that the team spirit does not matter if you're a woman and a man or a man, but whether you're professional or not. I somehow doubt that. Anyway, in Norway, unity of soldiers has not been a major issue. But through the research that has been done on women in the armed forces, a number of citations have been gathered saying that women argue so much between themselves, Rhodes believes. There should also be a reason why girls cannot live in rooms only with other girls. She believes that researchers, based on interviews, must make sure that such myths are not reproduced in research. Why do men believe that men will automatically create a conflict-free setting if they only get alone, while claiming girls cannot cooperate with only girls? The women's handball, for instance, are the icons of cooperation. Yeah, no. Skipping a lot more. Anthony King is one of the great scientists in Women in Combat, and he finds that what creates the feeling is that the team performs well, that they get into a sort of team spirit. The FFI researcher believes that there are several perspectives that require a critical look from social scientists, as we now go from a duty of conscription to all men to a selective service where only the best among women and men are chosen. Someone will be replaced. It is the first and foremost the working class boys to be replaced and middle class girls coming in. The defense is now characterized by middle class disease that is good at school and on the sports field, and who would like to have the CV that they have also been in the armed forces, says Rhodes. The resistance to women in the armed forces is greatest among men who are feeling bypassed in one area. They have passed away at school. Now they do not come into the armed forces, who are now only interested in recruiting the best. Much of the activity in the armed forces is linked to the garage, and maybe there are garrisons who will stay in the armed forces, not the ones who had the best grades at school or scored the best at the 3,000-meter race. This could have an impact on the armed forces' ability to retain personnel in work after the more exciting education, emphasizing sports performance that fits the middle class. But the class perspective is completely lacking in research on the armed forces, the FFI researcher also argues. She believes that class in the armed forces is a research question that civil society should address. Harald Heuback is afraid that the armed forces is now getting too good, so good that it's not for the armed forces' own best. It is the cream of the Norwegian youth that is now being elected on a session, but the best of the country's 19 to 20-year-olds should do something else, he thinks. For example, they should study medicine or create new jobs. Those who are going to the armed forces are, in my view, generally good people. One has to keep in mind what we really do with this and how this impacts us in everyday life. It is not the creativity sought by the armed forces. You must be persistent and usually intelligent. The cream of the cream does not thrive there. It is clear that some defense industries need special expertise, Heuback believes. But if you're a gunman, I think it's better if you're usually uphill. I guess what he means is that it's better if you come from a countryside working class background. When you choose the cream, we lose a lot of good people who do not even come to the session. There are too many boys who don't even show up anymore, as we need, Heuback believes. Skipping a bit more. The military has recently completed another major reform, the new military order, designed to create a specialist corps that provides better opportunities to recruit personnel with practical skills. Here we are concerned that not only should we focus on high school grades as in the old days, now it is no longer a requirement to go to a longer academic war school for appointment in the armed forces, says Vâlsan. It may be that we need more research on how this is happening. These are the important discussions to take forward, he believes. He also assures the researchers that they will still invest funds to research in gender in the armed forces, even though a 10-year research project is now being shut down. He points out that there are also other data sources available than just research. The Armed Forces Survey investigates the condition of the armed forces personnel regularly, close quote, and skipping even a bit more. So basically, and the the well, I guess the takeaway is stop treating the military like a social experiment.
You know, I was under the impression that the purpose of the military was to defend the country and, in case of some sort of invasion, kill the invaders. But apparently, I was wrong. Apparently, it's more the purpose of military is to include women and to be very inclusive and diverse.
And
So I
mimic
don't know.
and mimic the handball teams.
Yeah. And also apparently um, it's a place where people can fresh up their CV so that they'll be more likely to get a job, and you know, instead of actually doing work that's going to further their actual career. I mean, this whole concern is being raised here that the army taking the best and the brightest is not necessarily a good thing, because just because you have good grades in school doesn't mean that you're going to be a particularly productive member of the military, and also doesn't mean that your skills are most useful in the military. Sure, you need competent people in the military, but you also need competent people in any field. It doesn't matter what field you're talking about.
They've been running the military as a social experiment since the mid 1980s.
Not in Norway, no. I mean, Norway is just getting started.
The U.S. it's been like this since the mid 1980s, and it's gotten progressively worse as time goes on. Now, granted, every time you see the huge push to the next ground invasion, all of a sudden they want to push all that in the background. But the moment you get back to garrison, it's a fucking hellhole. You will sit inside of theaters and you will have equal opportunity representatives come up and tell you every quarter exactly what pieces of shit men are, how much they rape, and that every single woman that is in that audience sitting next to one of these male soldiers needs to be afraid.
Yeah, that's Norway going in that direction. They still don't have that yet, but they have filled up the place with middle class women who are by far the demographic most likely to be militant feminists in any Scandinavian country. That includes Norway. So yeah, I expect that to be the next step.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and a lot of this equal opportunity stuff is taken care of through outside contractors, and every single time you trace the money back, you're tracing it back to some fucking feminist egghead who's riding the gravy train of government grants and loans. Every single time. And these people don't know when to quit. And I'll tell you, when you have a profession like the military, it will never quit. It will never end. They could make it as gender inclusive as they possibly wanted. But because you've got some guys with guns, guess what? That is just a business. Yeah, it's a business to these people. This isn't about their ideals. This is a business.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same in Norway. I mean, this article is essentially a backlash by one single strong enough voice. This guy, Lieutenant Colonel Harald Høibæk, who is like, hold on a second. There's just too many feminists getting rich off government military contracts studying gender, whilst I'm inside the military, and I'm like, we're looking in the wrong direction. Because there's many portions. The original article is just really long, and there's no way I could read it on this show. But yeah, that's basically what's happening in Norway now. Admittedly, they're a bit, like, I would say, 10 years behind the United States on this one. Usually Norway is ahead of the progressive lunacy curve, but in this case it's behind. But yeah.
Nobody dares to say anything in the U.S. Not until after they get out of the military, anyway.
Mhm.
Here's a good reference for you. Terrence Pop.
Mhm. Yeah. Winning.
He's got his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Go watch that guy. That guy lays it down. He'll let you know exactly how it is. I've interviewed him before, and the guy's really got it going as far as having his finger on the pulse of the type of things you can expect in the military and the type of misandry that you are surrounded with every single day. And you've got all these women that are going in who think they're stepping into an environment where they're actually going to be challenged. No. The answer is no. No, you're gonna be coddled. You're gonna be coddled because everyone's gonna be too afraid of your ass to do anything other than to coddle you. Because all it takes is one tiny report, and guess what? You don't get that promotion. It might not even be an official reprimand or anything like that. It could just be one tiny little report, one thing whispered in the wrong ear, and all of a sudden, oops, oh, we lost a file. Sorry, can't come up for promotion this quarter. Oops, we lost something else. Sorry, you can't go to this school in order to get your promotion next quarter. The environment is like that. And I've seen it time and time again. They will take unofficial channels where they need to take unofficial channels because they're so damn afraid of anything looking out of place, because these fucking harpies get in there and make everyone's life a living hell.
Yeah, at the very least, in the United States, they have to at least have this pretension, as long as there is direct combat and everyone is on the field, at least some of that is put in the background, as you said it. But in Norway, they don't even have to run that pretension at all, since the Norwegian military hasn't seen any much of live action for quite some time. I mean, yeah, sure, they're a NATO funding member, but in most NATO operations, Norway took a step back almost every
Yeah.
single time.
When you find yourself over in a place like Iraq or Afghanistan, you don't have that much to worry about. People are too busy looking out for the next IED than to care whether Private Shayna is going to bitch about the fact that her bathroom isn't clean, and that it's sexist if it's not. Nobody gives a fuck. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the moment you get back in garrison or back in the States, back to your regular duty station, and you're sitting out there in the motor pool wrenching on the damn Humvee, first female soldier that walks up to you, you're basically, oh, fuck me, what does she want? And hope like hell that she doesn't want to stick around and say anything, because just want to walk away, because you don't know. You don't know if this bitch is going to walk over to someone and say something stupid or not. So you end up avoiding these female soldiers as best you can, or you end up choosing an MOS where you really don't have to worry about that. And unfortunately, they're pushing for women in every part of the military at this point. And I might add, I wouldn't give so much of a shit about it if they would stick to the same standard, but they refuse to do so. So you've got all these guys who are in the military who are basically browbeaten into acting like a bunch of white knights. You will never find more white knights than you will find in the military, because they are fucking crammed with that shit every single quarter that they are. That means every quarter of the year, they're all put in one big gymnasium or auditorium or theater, and they're harangued by the local feminist hegemony over exactly what pieces of shit they are.
How long
And
is
then every single weekend, you know, you've got your formation. You're standing out in formation. Every single weekend, your commanders are required to tell you, don't beat your wife, don't beat your kids, don't beat your dog.
how much longer will this go? Is this going to last? Because eventually, again, what cannot go on will not go on.
Oh, in the military, it'll last as long as it needs to last. And that's the beauty about what's happening and why this is such a wonderful gravy train for these people over in Norway. Hey, they've got it made. They're in. They're in. Norway's fucked, just like the U.S. is. They're fucked. There's nothing now that can be done because the government's going to spend as much money as it needs to spend on the military and as much money as is needed in order to keep the PR machine running for the military. They will do whatever it takes. Period. Whatever it takes. And you know what? Unlike other professions, and you do happen to have a generation of men who basically say, fuck it, let all the women join the military. I'm checking out. Draft.
Yep.
So, no, I'm sorry. Norway is fucked. Norway's military is screwed. There is nothing anyone's going to do about it. And I don't care what kind of government you get in power, it's too late. Because the moment they go to reach to pull a plug on something in some special committee or some parliamentary action, woo! All of a sudden, even the United Nations is talking about that shit. And your country's just the worst piece of shit in the world for trying to pull a plug on something that's already been established like this.
Yeah, so I guess it would take a Norwegian Trump to just say, oh, the UN is talking shit about us. Who cares? Pull the
Trump
plug.
isn't going to do anything about this.
Oh, no, of course not. But I'm saying someone with that character is like, yeah, the UN is talking shit about us. Who cares?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all, man. It's hang it up. Hang it up. It's just not going to happen. It's game over, dude. You lost that quarter. It's gone. Now you're going to have feminists sitting in positions of power in the military for the rest of their lives, making it big. And there is nothing you or me or anybody else, not even the people in power, can do anything about it. It's done.
I'm not really that pessimistic, although I do agree that it's probably going to take a lot of time until
It'll take a miracle. I mean, full blown Princess Bride, Miracle Max type of miracle for that shit to end. It's mostly dead.
I guess the longer time goes, it gets harder to disentrench it, because in Norway this is just a couple of years old. It's not
It'll
really
last.
that old.
It'll last. I'm telling you, it'll last. We're gonna have the same conversation in 15 years. I promise you.
Right. Well, that's sad.
I'm sorry. I'm just telling you. I'm telling you all how it is when it comes to the military and how their PR machine operates and everything. I saw that shit from the inside.
Mhm.
I know exactly what happens inside that, how these organizations think and how they react to outside pressures. I know exactly what happens. And you're going to have your politicians fold like a house of cards. I don't care if they're left, right, center, or one-eyed, one-horn, flying purple people eater. They're going to fucking cave.
Well, I don't know. And the reason I say I don't know is because Norway has done some other types of world firsts, such as pulling the state funding for university feminists and several other things that everyone else thought is impossible or it would take a miracle. Well, the miracles did happen. That's why I'm not entirely. I mean, if this were a conversation about Denmark or about Sweden, I would entirely be in agreement with you. But I think Norway has resources to do these kinds of things that anywhere else would seem impossible. They did it in the past. Not in the military, admittedly, but they've done impossible things in the past.
They did it in the past because there isn't a finger on a nuclear weapon somewhere. There isn't a bunch of guns in the hands of men. It's just a bunch of damn students and teachers running around. Here, people will look at it and nothing in the world hits that primal switch inside of everybody's head that screams aggression and power like an army. I'm sorry. That's the way it is, man. I mean, what do you think aggression and power when you go walk into a university? No, I'm thinking a bunch of fucking eggheads sitting around acting like nerds. How intimidating is that? But when you think of a bunch of men with guns and they're about to blow shit up, oh my God, we better temper these motherfuckers or they're going to rape everything in sight.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I mean, from a PR perspective, it is with the potential of being an endless machine and a business. I just don't think it can be infinite. It can take a long time.
As long as Norway exists, we'll put it that way. Okay. Hey, nothing's forever. Sun's got to burn up the earth sometime.
Hey, maybe the Islamists will take over at some point.
But it won't be Norway, and it won't be Norway's army.
Fair enough.
You understand what I'm saying?
Sure, it would be the Holy Caliphate's army. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's sad. Speaking of sad, we're over time, but hey, it's the last installment for this year, so we can afford a little bit of stretching the time. Speaking of sad, let's go to the last story. Coming from Denmark, from Nyheter TV2. A 2-year-old has been living in jail for his entire lifetime. His father is struggling to get him out. This is the saddest story I've read probably throughout this entire current year plus 2. Should children under the age of 3 years of age stay in jail with their inmate parents? Yes, the Red Barnet believes, while the prison officers are very critical. Red Barnet is the Danish chapter of the UK-based international organization Save the Children. So, don't come and tell me that there's no better alternative than a prison cell. Alexander shows a video of his 2-year-old son who laughs. The recording is from one of the times when Alexander has had contact with his son. Since his birth, the son has lived with his mother, who is serving as a prison sentence for a murder conviction in Ringe State Prison. But Alexander believes that his son is injured by living there. He's therefore desperate to have his son live with him. There are no children in prison. The people who sit there have done some bad things. It's not a place for children, says Alexander. For the sake of the child, TV2 does not bring Alexander's full name or face. Even though Alexander does not think that prison is the right home for his son, authorities and courts have so far decided that the son should live with his mother, a decision that leans up the Custody Act that allows children up to 3 years to stay with the descending parent if it is in the best interest of the child. According to Alexander's lawyer, family attorney Sonia Toft, the law should be changed. In Norway, it is not permitted to have children in prison, neither under 3 nor over 3 years of age, nor should it be allowed in Denmark. Alexander was in prison for robbery and drug sales in 2015 when he met his son's mother. According to Alexander, they had a short-term relationship, but at Alexander's release in December 2015, he found out that he had become a father. While he restarted his life outside the bars by starting his own business, he began to meet with his son. But he wanted the son to live with him and not in prison, so he went to court to change the son's place of residence. However, the agency found that the child should still live with the mother because of their close connection. Alexander appealed the case to the Supreme Court, which has not taken yet a position. The hearing in front of the Danish Supreme Court is scheduled to take place in January 2018. Meanwhile, the municipality of Næstved, the mother's residence municipality, developed a so-called Section 50 study of the well-being of the son. It recommends that the son live with Alexander. In the survey, the municipality writes that the child, according to prison officers, goes from one arm to the other among the inmates and that he is being stimulated by 8 different inmates with a criminal background and an abuse background. Prison officers do not believe that the inmates possess acceptable social conduct and are without educational skills and resources. It appears that the inmates don't know how to read the kids' signals and that it is immediately seen that the name redacted is being used for entertainment and advertising. It is also apparent that the department is not secured in a way that it can be ruled out that the kid could be injured, according to the investigation. At the same time, the prison officers describe that the other inmates teach the child to protest and say unacceptable words, that the child is exposed to stress and noise. According to the municipality's investigation, Ringe State Prison informs the prison officers that the prison does not have the right parenting environment for the son. Conversely, the study does not conclude that the son is mistaken, and it is pointed out that the mother is mistreated. And it is pointed out that the mother is thought to be competent, and that her mother's and the son have a good and healthy relationship. The son considers, according to the municipality's case manager, his mother as his primary caretaker and writes, quote, "We know that the child's connection with the mother or other caregivers in the first years of life is the foundation for the development of personality. In order for a child to develop and become an independent individual, it is important that the child is met with empathy, care, and love." Skipping a bit. Nevertheless, with the new information about the son's life in prison, Alexander decided this is not appropriate for his son. After a meeting, he chose to take his son home instead of handing him back to the mother in prison. Any responsible father with respect for himself would have taken the same decision, he said about the act. The son lived with Alexander for more than a month before he was recently retrieved by the court of law, who, together with the police and municipality, drove the 3-year-old boy back to the prison in Ringe. Alexander's lawyer, Sonia Toft, does not understand how the authorities can let her client's son live with the mother. There is no security in a prison, and even the officers have expressed that they have not been able to give him security there. However, the authorities have not assessed whether this information could be even considered. Skipping a bit, Red Barnet psychologist Gunnar Sørensen will not relate to Alexander's specific case, but in principle, he does not think it is necessarily always a bad solution for a smaller child to live with a parent in prison. If there is a good connection between the child and the parent, especially the mother, it would be harmful for the child to break the emotional connection there. But of course, it is necessary to consider that the mother has the caring ability and parental ability, he says, and states that the prison can work well as a good home for the child. For this reason, Gunnar Sørensen does not want to prohibit children from living with an inmate parent. It would be wrong to enact a general ban on it, he added, skipping a bit more. The Prisons Federation's national chairman, Kim Østerby, representing the prison correctional officers in Denmark, believes that infants in prisons should be a last resort only when all of the other options are excluded. Children do not belong in prisons at all. I think we live in a time where there definitely are opportunities on the father's side, the outside family, or the social authorities to make this much better than the experience of a child living in prison, says Kim Østerby. He attaches particular importance to the fact that the environment in Danish prisons is not suitable for children. The environment in closed prisons is very, very raw. It's tense. At times, threats and ugly language piss through the air, and I don't think that a little infant or baby should be exposed to it at all. Specifically, Kim Østerby describes the prisoners' conversation topics that are offered about drugs and violence. It is simply not healthy for a child when you know that the whole life in his first 3 years was lived there. It is perfectly absurd that he is to be compelled to live in an environment that is so dense and violent like ours is, he says. Whether the son of Alexander is to reside with him or to stay with his mother in jail will not be decided in a court of law until January. Until then, Alexander can do nothing but wait. I totally agree that the child needs both his mother and his father, but it is not my fault that his mother is in jail, nor is it my son's fault. He is taken as a hostage in all of this, he says. TV2 has been in contact with her mother's lawyer, Caroline Døssing Norman, who states that neither her nor her client wishes to comment on the case as it is a pending case. Bravo, Denmark. Jesus fucking Christ. What kind of twisted logic is that? Oh, we're not going to let a kid live with his father who is a business owner. No, no, no. Let him live with the convicted murderer that is his mother in a prison jail, in a jail cell. Really?
Yeah, like maybe I would have some sort of sympathy for this case if um, there was no father, the father wasn't involved with the child, and there weren't any, I don't know, grandparents or something like that who could take care of the child. Maybe living with the murderer mother is better than living in a foster home. Maybe, but if the choice is living with the murderer mother who's in prison versus the business owner father who's not in prison, I would think the interest of the child would be clear.
Yeah. And
I mean,
again,
I'm not saying that the child shouldn't have any contact with the mother. You can still visit and so on, but why should the child be in prison? Doesn't make any fucking sense.
yeah, it's something that can only come up from a Danish child protection agency or from a Scandinavian one in general. Similar nonsense I've heard arguments made from the Barne Vernet, which is a child protection agency in Norway. Well, until they banned children living in prison, basically. I mean, the attorney of this chap, Mrs. Sonia Toft, she has a point when she gives the example with Norway, because in Norway such cases used to occur until the parliament came in and said, we never thought that we should have a law about this, but anyway, here's a law that says children should be living in prison. I mean, I never thought. No, think a bit. Think of it. My country doesn't have a law that says children shouldn't be living in prisons either. But then again, nobody thought that we should have such a law. Amazing, absolutely amazing. On the other hand, I have to say something that is not going to be popular, namely that this is why we have sex-segregated prisons in the non-feminist countries, whatever, how few of them still exist in Europe.
Yeah.
This is precisely why. So we don't have children conceived in prison. So we don't have this kind of nonsense on our hands. Because, yeah, sure, this chap, Alexander, has a point. Yeah, sure, it's not his fault that the mother is in jail, nor is the son's fault that the mother is in jail. But you know what? It is your fault that the son exists. That's one aspect. The second aspect is, yeah, it is the state's fault. I mean, you shouldn't have had to be able to have a short-term relationship with this murderer, period.
Yep.
Is that really that bad to say that, yeah, maybe sex-segregated jails are a good idea? And not just sex-segregated, but also felony-segregated. I mean, this guy probably dealt some dope or whatever, because if he only served 2 years, yeah, probably he sold some dope and maybe, I don't know, maybe punched someone in the face or something like that. It wasn't something serious. But, that lady killed people. So, maybe there should be some segregation on that aspect too. I mean, I know there is in this country because I've been inside jails too, as part of a study on how prisoners are treated. And there is segregation by offense. Basically, rapists don't live in the same quarters as the petty thieves, and the petty thieves don't live in the same quarters as murderers, and so on. Apparently, Denmark doesn't have that anymore, or at least not on the Ringe state prison, which is weird.
Yeah.
Amazing. Any bets? I mean, the hearing starts in January 2018. Any bets? Will the Danish Supreme Court be kind enough to recognize what I guess should be self-evident, namely that, yeah, maybe it's not a good idea for children to live in jail? Or will the Supreme Court say, yeah, no, it's a good thing? I mean,
it's hard to tell.
it is.
I don't know enough about the Danish system to make any sort of informed prediction, but
I know a bit.
I actually am gonna put some faith in humanity and say that they are going to take the common sense view, but I'm very uncertain about the prediction.
Yeah, and what's worse and dents my faith in humanity a little bit is that you have the the psychologist for the Save the Children chapter, the Red Barnet, arguing that no, it's actually quite swell for kids to live in for kids to live in prison. I'm like, really? I mean, if these are the psychologists for Save the Children, maybe the kids don't need to be saved.
Maybe it's good preparation for public school.
Yeah, fair enough. I can't really argue against that. You got me here. Yeah, it is. It is good preparation for public school in many ways, especially the public school in Denmark. Yeah, sure.
If you learn to live in prison, then your public school should be fine.
Yeah, it should be fun and should be piece of cake. I mean, you wouldn't have adaptation problems at all. Yeah, amazing. And again, I've seen someone arguing, but the prisons in Scandinavia aren't exactly the prisons we know from the American movies. Bullshit. The prisons where murderers are housed, they pretty much look like the ones you've seen in the movies most of the time. And even if that weren't the case, still, it's a jail.
Yeah, it's like maybe the murderers in Scandinavia are really nice people.
Yeah, amazing. All right, then I will also join you in hoping that the Danish Supreme Court will be I don't know, formed by humans, and a bunch of humans will decide to enact a very human decision, which is to say that maybe it's not a good idea for 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds to live in jail for their entire lives. Maybe that's not really healthy. So with that, I'm kind of out of things to say for the remaining of the current year +2, but I know you have a few more things to say.
I would like to invite you to visit my blog, which is at orthogonalideas.com. And then, since this is the last show of the year, I wish you a Merry Christmas, whatever else you want to celebrate, and Happy New Year. And I guess I'll see you in the current year +3.
Yep. Merry Christmas to you all and a Happy New Year. See you all next year.
Oh, and one other thing. Take the red pill.